right, ladies and gentlemen, what's up? It's Michael Dean, and I wanted to do a quick video talking about how I got into Prince. I know I always do the audio podcast thing, but I'm trying to get into the video, so I'm going to do a little video, handheld action style. But so first thing I want to do is again talk about how I got into Prince. Not like, and I should say more so, not how I heard of Prince, but like what was it that got me hardcore into Prince? Basically, I got to take it back to the 80s, man. This was been like, I think when the Controversy album came out, and I had went to Houston, Texas to visit my cousin. And you know, I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington. So I went out to Houston. It was summertime. Went out there with my grandmother. And man, when I got there, we went to somebody's, like it was a house party or something like that. Again, keep in mind, this must have been like, what, 81 or 80 or something like that? So I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. So anyway, go to this house party, and everybody is just talking about, oh, have you heard it? Have you heard it? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And at the time, I didn't know this, they were talking about the Dirty Mind album, and they were playing it at this party I was at, and that's all they were playing. And I kind of remember Head, because they were mentioning it, and having since had heard the song, I kind of remember hearing it, but you know, I was so young, I had no idea what the song was about, or you know what what he was talking about in there. But you know, they was like, oh yeah, you're gonna play this, but I thought nothing of it. You know, I was like, okay, I don't know, these are kind of older kids. And you know, the other funny thing was, you know, since I was from like Seattle, and I'm coming down there to Texas, you know, Houston, I believe it was in the 5th Ward. You know, I talked, this is when I realized at the time, I was like, well, why your cousin sound white? You know, why you talk like that? Because, you know, I was just talking how I talk today. But anyway, then I went back to Seattle, heard nothing about Prince again. You know, it was just only I won't even say top 40 radio, because it was like the black radio that was playing in Seattle. And back then, radio was like heavily segregated and regional. So what might have been hitting in one city may not be bumping in Seattle, Washington, or New York, or vice versa. So Prince was not mainstream at that time. You know, he was really in certain areas where he was really locked in, but he hadn't cracked, you know, that whole mainstream thing yet. Maybe a year or so later, I go back again. And this would have been the time that Controversy was out. And I remember my cousin, she had the Controversy poster on her wall. Again, I didn't know who Prince was. I just knew it was just some half-naked dude up on the wall. And it looked crazy to me, and it looked even more crazy to my grandmother, because my grandmother came in there and saw that poster, ripped it down, shredded it. I was laughing, like, 'cause again, I didn't know anything. You know, I just thought it was some sexual thing or something. Tore it up. But again, they was playing the music, and I actually, at this time, I remember my aunt. She was into music, and she knew I liked music a lot. And I remember when I got there, and I may be getting my times confused, but I remember getting off the airplane when she picked us up. She was like, oh, I gotta take you to the record store. You gotta get these new jams or whatever. And one of them distinctively I remember was Roger, Heard It Through the Grapevine. And that must have been when it just came out, because they was playing it on the radio, and we went to the record store and she bought that. But the other song that I heard on the radio, and again, didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew that it was dope, it was Get It Up by The Time. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, whoa, what is this? You know, it was dope, but didn't hear anything about it. But again, they were talking about Prince. So how did I get in Prince? So years later, when Purple Rain is getting ready to come out, my cousin moves back to Seattle, and she's like, "Yo, we're going to see this movie, Purple Rain. It's Prince." I'm like, "Oh, that's that dude that you guys were listening to back then." She's like, "Yeah, his new album's coming out. Matter of fact, the Time's coming out at the same time." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I don't know who any of these guys are, but whatever. I'm about to go get this King Rock." You know, I was.
You know what he's saying.
This was when hip hop was really like, kind of bursting through, and we was all into hip hop, to Run DMC and all that Houdini and stuff. So I was like, cool. I remember we went and bought, or she went and bought the Purple Rain album and the Time album, and they were both out before the movie was out, if I'm not mistaken. And we used to go to this park. And so we went to the park, and we had a little boom box, and we would take turns playing, music. And of course, I didn't want to hear none of that. I was like, I don't want to hear that, yada, yada. But when we started playing the Time, I was like, yo, that's the joint, okay. And then she started playing the Purple Rain, and at first, I was like, But then I was like, I can't deny it. It's actually pretty good. And then just right around this time, When Doves Cry becomes a big hit on the radio. Like, out of nowhere, it's like the biggest song. Even my mom knows the song because they're playing it on the radio heavy, like, how can you just leave me? So that song is big, and then since the same time, MTV is really starting to blow, and you start to see the video, right? So I'm like, oh, it's this cat. And then, of course, when the movie was getting ready to come out, it was the equivalent of like a Marvel movie today. Like, at least at my high school, I was a freshman at high school at the time, and everybody was going to go see Purple Rain that day it came out. Because, the word on the street, or the buzz, was that it was borderline X-rated. And at this time, I think, Prince had really started to percolate all over the country, and particularly, in our area, he was really starting to, but he had, again, he had the biggest song, and then we knew it was some sexual type of stuff, but you didn't know much about it. So yeah, it was all on deck. Day one dollars, as we said. We was all at the movie theater to go see this movie because we had heard about it, and as you already know, it was a head-busting experience. I mean, that blew our heads up. And I really listened to the record, right, and the album. And then the tour starts. And so when he goes on the Purple Rain tour, comes to the Seattle area, at the Tacoma Dome to be exact, and we got tickets. And I had never really been to a big concert like that before. I went to a few different things, but nothing that I really wanted to see and had my full attention. So this one we went, and it was so interesting is that it had sold out. I mean, it was so big that they sold tickets to sit behind the stage, right? And now thinking of it now, it's an interesting sort of way that it was almost like in the round, but it wasn't in the round. I mean, the stage was set as your normal, the stage is over here, and then everybody's sitting over here. But they also had it set up where they had some risers, higher seats in the back, that you could sit back there, and he had like a little ramp that he could walk up around, would take him over there so he could address the people that sat in the back as well. And let me tell you, man, after I saw that concert, it was over. That's when I was like, yo, I'm on board. This cat jamming. Like, I had never seen nothing like that, because he was just jamming. I was like, so I was blown away. So after I saw the concert, that's when I knew, yo, this is that dude. I love music now. I can identify with it. Everything was just, it was everything I saw on that screen put to the stage and more. And the other part that was very interesting, you kind of, the persona or the way the image was in the movies and stuff and the pictures, it always seemed so serious, like it was, you know, he never would smile. It seemed like when he was in the concert, he was smiling and having a good time and like laughing, and the joy, you know what I'm saying? Like I was like, man, this dude is incredible. I'm on board for whatever. So that's when I locked in. And then the last part I'll say is, so then I was like, okay, I'm ready. And then shortly after this, you know, he's dropping a new album, Around the World in a Day. And what was interesting back then was, again, there wasn't no internet back then. There wasn't blogs and all this stuff, so the information trickled out. But the thing that I remember about it now is there wasn't very many pictures of Prince during this time. Right after Purple Rain, and then to the release of Around the World in a Day, there was not very many promo pictures of Prince. You know, the only real picture that I can think of at that time was his image in the Raspberry Beret video. But he wasn't on the cover of the record. If I'm not mistaken, there were no promo pictures back then from that period. So we didn't know what it looked like. All I had to go by was the 12 inches. That's when the 12-inch releases was ridiculous. And his picture wasn't on those either. It was images from the cover art of the album and stuff. But it was like you was just transported into another world with those B-sides and the extended versions of those songs. And it just became this whole other thing, man, where it's like, God, you almost envisioned him just what you remembered from the movie, and then what you saw on the video, and the image of Prince from Raspberry Beret was so different from that Purple Rain image. It was just like, it was another head bust. Like, is this the same guy? Like, whoa, you look crazy. Like, what? But the music was incredible. So that was like head busting again. And that's when I was really like, yo, it was the music that was so important. It wasn't even about him, because you didn't see him. He didn't go on tour for that album. And, you know, during that break, that whole period, I guess, you know, he works on Under the Cherry Moon in the Parade. And it wasn't until that, when he came out with that, then there was a whole bunch of pictures. And of course, he's doing the movie, and his whole image was totally different all over again. And she was on fire. So suffice to say all of that, that's how I got hooked into some Prince, where I was like, yo, this brother right here, man, I'm studying every move. The music is ridiculous. Nobody had that sound. You knew when you heard it, that was some Prince, and you knew when it wasn't. You know, he didn't sound like nobody. So anyway, just a quick video, man. I just wanted to get on here and talk about how I got into Prince. But I really want to know, how did you get hooked into Prince? Listen, with that said, work it like a job. We'll see you next time. Yeah.